This is the thing that we were doing at Drift before I left. I think the number one thing is to have alignment across the company on what are the goals for the company for the year. And then from there to identify the goals. So actually one thing that I stole from Salesforce, but they really would like everybody to do it, is what's called the V2 Mom. It's an alignment tool. A lot of people use Google's OKR process. And Google's OKR process is great because it sets very clear goals and people understand what are the numbers. But the V2 Mom process, it creates a story. And the company can basically identify what is that herald and the thing that everybody should hang their hat on. Where are they trying to go? What is that vision? How do they emotionally get behind it? And then what is the story behind it? What are the values? And then what are the methods and who are the owners of those methods? And on top of that, the metrics. You can do OKR and V2 Mom, but either way, at least in the marketing side, but it's great if the whole company does it, is to identify what are you about? What is your purpose in the company? And then what are you going to do? What are the metrics that you're going to stand up for? What are you going to stand for emotionally? And then what are you going to stand up for? For example, at Drift, the idea was we're going to transform the business. It's great that we have this great brand and we're doing tons of content marketing and everything else, but that attracts SMBs. Now we're going to move to the enterprise. What does that look like? In the end of the day, what Drift stood for and what Drift marketing stood for was transforming for the future of marketing. What does the future of marketing look like? And that's what Drift as a product is trying to give to their clients, but it's also what Drift as the marketer need to be. You can't tell everybody use our solution and you're going to be marching towards the future if you're not already demonstrating and being that example of the future. So that was our vision. This is the example of the future. If you're going to be an enterprise marketer, you need to basically be doing these things. And then that would help us get to our goals, which is X amount of growth in revenue and such amount of pipeline. Maybe one of the things we were looking at was increase in ASP based on messaging, whatever those things might be. So I would say that's the first and most important thing is alignment at the corporate level of what marketing is being measured on. And alignment within the marketing organization of who are you, what are you about, and how is that going to help you to get to your goals. The first part of what we did, and especially at the CMO marketing level, is to align with the operations team, with CFO, et cetera, on what is the model that you're building for your company. How much of the revenue is coming from pipeline generated from sales? How much is coming from marketing? How much is product-led growth? However your model is set up. And then looking at those and aligning on those metrics, the numbers, the math of the business. If you have a trial-based product-led growth business, you may have 50% of your revenue there, but then there's 50% that needs to be driven by other things. So figuring out the math of like, where is your revenue coming from? And then backing into that with operations team and with sales, if 50% is going to be coming not from product-led growth, but it's going to be coming from feeding the sales organization, what does marketing have to do to feed the sales organization? And what does sales have to do themselves? Do we agree that sales does anything themselves? In some places they do, in some places they don't. It depends if you're going after SMB or if you're going after enterprise. I think that that's a key thing from like the early days of a company is to identify how are you measuring the impact of marketing. That was the problem I had at Checker. They weren't measuring anything. Everything was just coming through forms on the website who can help you set up your tech stack and help you to begin to measure, even if it's high level. Even if you say, okay, we're going to do different campaigns and we're going to drive people to different pages, and then you just measure the traffic to those URLs. Just getting something at Checker, we didn't have the tech stack build out and we didn't have a functioning CR organization to follow up on the leads. So what we could measure initially was like when we do things in LinkedIn versus Facebook versus somewhere else, like even if we go to a trade show, what is the actual follow-up and the conversion? How many people do we touch? What level are those people? How does it convert at least to a meeting? And then because we didn't have a sales leader, it was very hard to figure out like, was it a good meeting or a bad meeting? Because there was nobody driving the sales organization. I think that's the key thing is to own what you can own. And if that's just traffic numbers, impression numbers, whatever it might be, then try and build the stack so that you can measure further and further down and partner with sales and sales ops so that you can actually measure the true impact. One of the things that's really hard to manage is brand. But I think the thing that you can measure is the growth of traffic to your website, as well as assuming that you're in a B2B space, your traffic and engagement in like LinkedIn. I think those two things are really good measures of how are you growing your brand, which is more top of funnel. At Drift, we also did tons of content marketing. And so it was not just about the traffic to the website, but engagement through the content. So we created this whole other area called Insider, where people would sign up to like access content.
Yeah.
Measured like every single week, new signups for Insider.
Oh.
And the growth of community membership. One of the things that's becoming bigger and more important as the world is so distracted is community. A good thing for people to think about is how do they build the community and use community growth and engagement of people within that community as also a top of funnel metric. We got lucky because I think like I was saying, this message of revenue, of having the conversation, of engaging with people and breaking through the noise became very relevant in COVID. And it was hard to pivot what you were doing. And I would say one of the things that is important, and I think we're seeing that now with Omicron and whatever else is going to happen, the pandemic times taught us that you have to be agile. I think the most important thing is that you understand what does your marketing organization stand for? What is your North Star? And then how is that going to help you achieve your goals? And then what are you going to do? What are the top 5 things that you're going to do as a team so that everyone feels aligned and they're very clear on the priorities? I think what I did when I got there was in the SMB mode, we just did lots of content and it was really noisy, but it wasn't clear who was it for and why were we doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And so everybody was just doing their own thing. And I said, hey guys, we have to do integrated campaigns. Like, which personas are we going after? What is our goal with them? Are we just trying to do Insider, which is brand building? Or are we doing messaging to sales leaders? Or what is it that we're doing? And how much of our budget are we going to put to each part? Is it new? Going after sales leaders was really new. So we had to put a decent amount of budget and see a lower return than continuing to do Insider content or going after marketing leaders. Through doing that mix of prioritization, everybody knew what we were doing and why we were doing it. So then when COVID hit, all of a sudden, we're like, oh shit, which of these things can we keep doing? And which ones do we have to change? Which messaging works? Which messaging doesn't work? By the end of March, we were already really clear. What are the changes we need to make to our campaigns? Do we need to change the messages? Do we need to stop things? What do we need to do? And everyone was able to align quickly on what we're doing. Same thing when Black Lives Matter happened. Each of the challenges that have happened over the past 2 years, we're able to look at the plan and say what we're doing, what has priority, what doesn't. One of the things we had to recognize is we're trying to do too many things for people being remote. We had to cut back. We really had to be clear on the prioritization and make sure that we just weren't oversubscribing people, because it's just exhausting to do everything in Zoom and from home, and maybe not the best work environments for some people. When we started COVID, I think we were doing 7 webinars a month and we were doing 9 blog posts a week. It was already way too much and people were getting burnt out and everything. Then when you think people are working at their dining room table where they're having dinner and breakfast and everything else too, and they're juggling their kids, and some people are single and they have a great environment for working and they can overachieve, but if you factor in the team and the team dynamic, we had to cut back. And so we moved to doing 4 blog posts a week, and we only did, I think, 4 or 5 webinars. We almost halved everything because we knew the goals by campaign. We were able to say, okay, maybe we just don't have capacity anymore to do some of these things. Maybe some of these priorities have to go away. If you do your annual planning and you think, okay, this is what we're going to do, and you've aligned it into the actual how are we going to do it with the prioritization, with integrated campaigns, then at any moment you can be agile and say, do these things matter or not? And not just based on like people capacity, but also what's happening in the market. I think the one thing that's happened in the past 2 years is that people are way too distracted. And doing webinars before maybe was great, but everybody's online all the time now. So is that great still? What is the tactic that you're going to do?
Yeah.
And maybe 100%. You have to change it. I think it's a more advanced thing for budgeting. First of all, most marketers are terrible at managing budget. And secondly, we talked about, do you have the tech stack to actually measure the impact of marketing? Ideally, depending on the size of your company and how established you are, you first start with signing up to measure something, whether it's your web traffic or whatever it is. Then build out the stack so that you're actually measuring from the channels which things matter, which things are driving to revenue. Then you can also layer on that the ROI with your budget. That's where you want to be, is that you actually know when I spend money here, it gives me this over here. I would love to have that all on day one, but it's not realistic for most people. At Drift is still doing business for 50 and above company, 50 employee and above. So it's basically SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. And so it's mixed. So you have to do everything, essentially. In the end of the day, even in the enterprise, you have to have air cover. So you have to figure out how much of your budget you're going to put toward brand and making sure that there's just enough noise and message out into the market. And then the other thing is that you need to look at your mix of what you're doing. Even if you want to be a revenue-focused marketer, you probably have to leave the revenue numbers specifically to sales, and you need to sign marketing up for the pipeline because that's closer to what you can actually impact. And then on these longer sales cycles, you can see how long does it take from what you do, how many touches do you have to do, how many people in the company do you have to touch, because you're like buying committee, and then how are you making the progress? So you can basically show and you can start to build out. I'm a big proponent of a marketing funnel. If you look in Salesforce at what sales is doing, they have their stages. So 50% of the business is in stage 2 and then down to stage 7, let's say, before close business. Marketing can do the same thing, and you can actually look at all of the people that are in your funnel to identify, okay, which people have you touched multiple times, which people have multiple people in the same company, especially in B2B. Most people, I think, are moving now to some level of ABM, where you're not going after the whole universe, but especially in enterprise, you're going after a certain number of accounts. Yeah. You could say, okay, we have 14,000 accounts we're going after. Of those 14,000, you can say stage 0 is we haven't touched anybody, nobody's engaging with us. Stage 4, we have 2 people, they've touched 2 things. Even if you don't have sophisticated MarTech stack, you can say, okay, for the deals that are closing, how many people did we talk to? And how many times did they touch marketing? Even if it's just touching different web pages. In order for a deal to become actual pipeline, we need to have somewhere between 7 and 12 touches. Yeah. So if you have a company and you're like, oh, this thing's amazing, it's going to be the next big deal, blah, 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 and you've touched one person twice, it's not going to happen.